As always, I like to start with review called Chazara. It's a main tool always when you learn Gemara or anything that it's always important to review a little bit. So I'm gonna review kind of what we covered last class at a bit of a clip, and um, and then we'll move on. So let me share. Everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so just to start with, the first class really took a look at a historical view of the evolution of the oral Torah to the written Mishnah and then Gemara and sort of the evolution of how it was passed down. We looked at different generations of rabbis. We looked a little bit at Rashi and Tosfot as to who they were and what they contributed. All these classes are on the synagogue YouTube page if anyone wants to go back. So this was last week's. Um, right? So we're in Masechet Brachot, which is the first tractate of the Mishnah, the first tractate of the Gemara, largely dealing with Jewish prayer. We took a look at the Mishnah. So this is the first Mishnah that's in Brachot. I'll just sort of translate it quickly. From when do we recite the Shema at night? Misha'a, right question mark. Misha'a Kohanim nichnasim lechol bitrumatan. From the time that the Kohanim enter to eat of the Truma. So the Truma briefly was the portion allotted from agriculture, the first portion of the harvest that was allotted to the Kohanim. Ad until Sof HaShmura HaRishona. And until so you can recite the Shema from the time that the Kohanim come in to eat of their truma until the end of the first watch. And I don't think that we discuss really what the first watch is, but we will today. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So this is what Rabbi Eliezer's opinion hold. And always just to review, anytime that we're talking about a rabbi in the Mishnah, they come from the Tanaic uh, period of history that were called Tanaim. The Chachamim omrim ad chatzot, but the sages say that you could say Shema or from when until midnight. Rabban Gamliel says Ad sheyaleh mul hashachar. Rabban Gamliel says until the dawn, until sunrise. Maaseh, there was a story or an incident. Uval banav mi beit hamishte, and Rabban Gamliel's sons came from the wedding hall. Amrulo said to him, "Lo karinu et Shema. We have not said the Shema yet." Right, so they were out partying at a wedding. They come home late. Uh-oh, Abba, we didn't say the Shema. Amar lahem, he says to them, Im lo ala mura shachar chayavin otam likrot. If the sunrise hasn't risen yet, you're still chayav, you're still obligated to recite the Shema. Velozo bilvad amru, and not only here, ella, rather, kol ma shamur chachamim ad chatzot, anytime that the chachamim say that there is a mitzvah that you're obligated to do until chatzot, mitzvatan ad sheyaleh shachar. The mitzvah actually extends until sunrise. Hekter chalavim ve'varim mitzvatan ad sheyaleh shachar. And as an example, the fats and the limbs that were burned after sacrifices were brought, you are commanded, so you are allowed to fulfill that mitzvah until sunrise. V'chol hanechalim liyom echad, and all the korbans that the kohanim were obligated to eat biyom echad, in one day. Mitzvatan ad sheyalem amud shachar. The mitzvah is actually you are able to fulfill the mitzvah until sunrise. Im kain, if so. Lama murchamim ad chatzot. Why did the sages even bother to say until chatzot? They could have just said until sunrise. Why did they say chatzot? Answer: Kedei lahachik adam min ha'avera, to distance a person from transgression, that we shouldn't delay. And it was sort of like a marker that they're saying chatzot because really you should do it by chatzot until midnight. But if you don't, then it's okay. You have until sunrise. There's actually a halachic principle that's called lechatchila b'diavad. This is a very common principle in Jewish law. Lechatchila, um, which would literally be translated as firstly you should do it this way, b'diavad. But if you can't do it that way, you're still allowed to do it this way. So
Is
that's
I'm so-
yeah, Eli.
I'm sorry, but if
Don't be
you do
sorry.
it, if you do it at 5 in the morning, isn't that the next day? It's after midnight. So you're going to do two shmas in one day.
Right. So we also took a look at this last week. That really the day begins at night,
Yeah,
and the mitzvah, right? Because we asked why did the Mishnah start with Shema at night,
yeah.
right? We should have started with Shema in the daytime, which is, I would say, the more popular Shema that people would recite is in Shacharit. Why are we starting with that at night? Because we all know the day really starts at sundown or at what's called Tzeta Kochavim, nightfall. That begins the next day. And just like the Torah, when Hashem creates the world, Vayhi erev vayhi voker yom echad, there was night and there was day, and that was day one. So night comes first, and we also know that the mitzvah of Shema comes from the words b'shoch becha u'v'kumecha, when you lie down and get up. And of course, what is written first in Torah? B'shoch becha, when you lie down. So that's why we've been focusing on the Shema at night first. And again, these concepts and questions come up again, which is why I don't mind going fast now because we are definitely going to dwell on these questions a bit more. So that's just the translation. This is the summary, right? So here we have Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is from when can you say Shema? From the time the Kohanim come to eat their truma until the end of the first watch. We don't really understand what that is yet. The sages say until midnight. Rabbi Gamliel says until the dawn. So there's a bit of a machloket. There's a bit of a disagreement. Then we looked at the Shema, right? Important to understand the mitzvah that we're commanded, and we sort of spoke about the importance of Shema, what it means, perhaps the kavanah, the intention that we should have when we recite it. We took a look at truma, what it is. So truma is the first offering from the harvest, only given to the kohanim. The kohanim had to be ritually pure to eat it, which we also briefly spoke about. Um, and it's typically 1/40th of the harvest for the kohanim. Um, and then we sort of, and I think this is where we ended talking about why do we think Rabbi Eliezer linked the recitation of the Shema to the time when Kohanim eat truma, right? Because his answer isn't an answer. It's not what time can we say Shema. Well, you can say Shema until 9:30. No, he answered in this vague way. You can eat Shema until Shirley and Avram eat dinner, right? It's like a weird. Well, I don't know what time you guys eat dinner. Do you always eat dinner at the same? Like that's not an answer. Um, okay, so I wanted to just briefly talk about the first opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says you can recite it until the end of the first watch. So what are these watches about? So in the service of the temple, the nighttime was divided into three watches. And this was to really provide an order to the work of the Kohanim. There was work always being done. um, services, rituals, more specific duties. And something that I actually forgot to write is, and we can all sort of relate to this need today. It was for security, right? That there was always someone up doing stuff and on watch because nighttime was a time of fear. So even just it just makes sense to have people awake doing things, so that the Beit HaMikdash can be secure. Right? Again, this is just the breakdown of the different opinions. I know I'm moving quickly, but just to get through this, and then we're going to go back. So we always go to Rashi. Rashi is first stop when you're learning. Certainly Mishnah and Gemara, Chumash, Navi, many other writings. So what does Rashi say? So just to talk about the breakdown of Rashi. Rashi is one of the only commentators that doesn't ask a question. We'll see soon in the Gemara, the format of the Gemara is 99% of the time, the Gemara comes out with a question. Like, what are we talking about here? What's going on here? And then we have different opinions from different people. This is what I think it means. No, this is what I think it means. This is how he did it. No, this is how he did it. Tosfot also always asks a question. A lot of I would say most of the Rishonim commentators, which is the period of time Rashi comes from, 10th century till I think 15th century, they ask a question and then answer it, or then, Rashi doesn't. Rashi almost have to figure out what his question is, but his format and most commentary formats are, and if you see my cursor, Meimatai korin et shma barvin. So there's always what's called the dibur hamatchil, the words of beginning, and are in bold, and then you have Rashi. So he'll always quote if it's the Mishnah or if it's the Gemara, like this is what I'm commenting on, and then he'll offer his comment. So this is the first Rashi that's in the Mishnah. And his comment is on the first line. Me'ematai korin et Shema b'arvin. From when do we recite Shema at night? Misha'a sha'kohanim nichnasim le'echol b'trumatan. From the hour that the Kohanim enter to eat of their truma. And of course, we also notice Rashi's handwriting is somewhat different than regular Hebrew script. And this is known as Ktav Rashi. Rashi pioneered this script. Kohanim. So he offers Kohanim shenitmeu betivlu ve'ariv shimshan v'yegia itam lechol bitruma. So the Kohanim that became impure v'tivlu, and they went to the mikvah to ritually purify themselves, and the Ariv Shimshan, and the nighttime came, right? Vehigia itam lechol bitruma, and the time came to eat of their truma. So sort of explaining, why did the Mishnah say that the Kohanim can eat it at night? He's saying that we're actually specifically talking about when the Kohanim become Tameh and they ritually purify themselves. They're only officially ritually pure the next day. When does the next day begin? At night. So we know that when they're able to eat of their truma, that they're ritually pure, and that is a defining marker that we know that that is the time that we can recite the Shema. Does that make sense? Questions?
No, keep going.
Keep
I'll
going.
ask I'll ask the question later when I'm sure of the question.
Perfect. Second Rashi, Ad Sof HaShmura HaRishona, he offers a comment on this. Shlish halayla k'demefaresh bigmara. So he's defining when is the end of the first watch. A third of the night, shlish halayla, shalosh, shlish halayla, as the Gemara explains, and he quotes where the Gemara explains, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. So if we looked at the third page of the Gemara, we would see that the Gemara explains that the end of the first watch is after a third of the night. And of course, we're always talking about halachic hours here. If you take the day into 24 hours, sunrise to sunset, so it's not exactly 60 minutes the way that we think of an hour. But so if the nighttime is 12 hours, so it would be 4 hours, 4 halachic hours into the night. Umisham ve'alach avar de lo mikra. And from then on, the time has passed that it's not the time of lying down. Tuzman shkiva. It's not the time of lying down. Velo karinan beshoch becha. And this is not referred to the words of beshoch becha. So Rashi is explaining that the Mishnah is telling us that in the first third of the night, that was the time that people were accustomed to lie down. And of course, beshoch becha means to lie down. So he's drawing on the literal commandment that people should recite the Shema in the first third of the night. Why? Because that's when they would lie down. Umikami hachinami lavzman shkiva, and before this time is not considered the time of shkiva, lying down. Lefichach, therefore, hakore kodem lachen lo yatzai yedei chovato. Sorry, I hear crying. It's okay. The one who recites the Shema Kodem before Lo Yatsa Yedei Chovato has not fulfilled the obligation of reciting Shema. Im Kain, so here he asks a cool question. If so, Lama Korino Ta Bevet HaKnesset? Why do we say Shema in Shul? Right? If let's schmooze a little bit on this question. If we just learned from the Mishnah that the commandment of saying Shema is beshoch becha, when you lie down, why did we say Shema tonight at Shul during Maariv? Oops. How do I take down my thumb? Ah. Does everybody understand the question?
Oh,
No?
well, repeat it again, please.
Okay. We are understanding that we are commanded to say the Shema at night. Yes?
Yes.
We are commanded to say the Shema at night. When at night? So we understand that that we are allowed to, from the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma until when? Until the end of the first watch. So Rashi is explaining to us when is the end of the first watch. The end of the first watch is after a third of the night. Why? Why is that the time? He, further explains, because that is the time when people are accustomed to lying down for bed. That's bedtime.
Okay.
So because the commandment is beshoch becha, when you lie down, Rashi is saying, most people lie down in the first third of the night. That's when you have to recite the Shema. And then he asks, what happens if a person says it before that time? And he answers, they have not fulfilled the obligation of reciting the Shema at night. He then asks another question. Okay, so if we're not fulfilling the obligation of reciting Shema at night, why do we say Shema in Shul at Maariv? No one's lying down in Shul. You've all been to Shul for Marev. You all know that we say the Shema every night in Marev. If we're not fulfilling our obligation to recite the Shema, why do we do it? Does everybody understand the question now?
Yes.
Anyone have an answer?
Is it possible that the obligation to say it as a community um, is more important than the obligation to say it at night? And another question I have is does they ever take into account that the length of the days and the time of sunset and sunrise varies quite a bit between mid winter and summer, so that in summer nightfall might be very close to when people, especially in a pre-electric
Right.
time when people usually went as soon as it got dark. So I wonder if that was, now people stay up unless they're like these riotous sons of Rabbi whatever
Right.
who stayed up the whole night. Most people, you know, didn't have any artificial lights.
I think in Jerusalem for the Beit HaMikdash, I think that it was not so radical. Like the days weren't like if you're in Sweden or Scandinavia, then the days get super long. But to my knowledge, I don't think that he adjusted for daylight savings time or not. His answer is a third of the night. Now, you could argue that the halachic hours of nighttime in a place where nighttime is an hour, you would be dividing that hour into 12, and then it would be the first third of that hour, right? So the halacha is structured in a way that it is based upon when the sun sets and when the sun rises. And in fact, that there is this issue today, and rabbis have adjudicated that Shabbat, they have fixed times for Shabbat even when the sun is out, because there's parts of the world that the sun never sets.
Say that again. 6 times.
I'm sorry?
What did you just say? 6 times?
Well, I think Bill was asking, and Bill, please, correct me if I'm wrong. Um, does Rashi or do the commentators take into account that the hours of the day and night change based on the season, based on the sort of based on the you know based on the location of the world? So my first answer was Beit HaMikdash didn't change drastically,
Yeah.
but in today's day and age, there are places where it does change drastically, and the rabbis have put into practice a fixed time that you say Marev, a fixed time Shabbat starts and ends, even if the sun is still out, because the sun could possibly never set for a while.
Like Stockholm, it's like Sweden.
Exactly.
Right. There's no night, it's daylight.
And he also offered an answer to the question, why do we say Shema and Shul? Because the importance of community. Um, and I think that's a fabulous answer, but we're still not fulfilling the obligation of saying Shema. So let's see what Rashi teaches us. So we asked, Imkein lama korino beit knesset? If so, why do we recite the Shema at Shul? Kedei la'amod batfila mitoch divrei Torah, so that we could stand in prayer with words of Torah. What does that answer mean? So that we could stand together in prayer with words of Torah.
Well, we have a minion for sure,
For
and we
sure.
together. Is
So
that
that's
what it?
stand together. Great. So it's the first part of his answer.
All right.
With words of Torah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't the Shema be the only bit of the Mariv service that actually quotes Torah?
There you go. Shema is the only part of Mariv that actually comes from the Torah. The rest does not.
Yes,
The
correct.
Amidah does not come from the Torah. The two brachot before Shema does not come from Shema is the only words of Torah.
Give
So
the lady,
his
I'm sorry, give the lady an honorable mention for that.
100%. So that's his answer. Is that so we could stand together in tefillah with words of Torah?
Good.
I think he had a few other comments. Um, ובקריאת פרשה ראשונה שאדם קורא. Oh, did I? Ah, v'hachitani b'braita bracha Yerushalmi. This is was taught in the Mishnah of the Yerushalmi Talmud. לפיכך חובה עלינו לקרוא mishetechashech, and then, but we're still obligated to recite the Shema after it gets dark. ובקריאת פרשה ראשונה שאדם קורא, and reading of the first section of the Shema at bedtime is enough.
So
Okay, so
Adam,
that
if we're not in community, let's say we're alone, right, for one reason or another, then we say the Shema silently, correct? We don't say it out loud.
that is correct.
Mhm.
But again, but his point is, even when you're in community, you're still not fulfilling the obligation of saying Shema
Because
because
you're
it's
supposed to
b'shoch
say
b'cha.
when you lie down, but it's obviously not
Exactly.
when you lie down. It's not when you're lying down. You're not going to say the Shema when you're lying down. It's before you lie down. That's my understanding. I mean, it's when you lie down.
No, he's saying it's when you lie down,
So when I'm in bed looking at
when you're
turn
in
off the
bed,
light, that's when I say
turn
it.
off the lights, going to
Lie down.
sleep, Shema
Okay.
alamita. That is exactly what he's saying. Okay, so that was really um that's the Mishnah. Okay. Now we're going to okay. Let's all recite the bracha for learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Beautiful. And if anyone wants to share of anyone that they would like to dedicate tonight's learning to, if someone needs, refuah shlema, if someone has a yortzeit, feel free to share a name. Again, Mishnah, if you play Scrabble, also equals the word neshama. So this is, it helps the soul, and it also elevates the soul. So if there's anyone who
It's
would, who would like to share.
my mother's yard site tonight.
I'm sorry, Bill?
My mother's yard site is tonight, tomorrow.
What was
So
her name?
in Hebrew,
Sure.
Dina Bat Yosef Visara, I think.
Dina Bar Yosef Isara. Beautiful. Anyone else? Great. Okay. So this was the Mishnah. On the right, we have the layout of the Daf Gemara, of the page of the Gemara. And so we always have the Mishnah Gemara text in the middle, Rashi on the inside of the page, Tosfot on the outside of the page, and different commentaries around. So this is Daf Bet Amud Aleph, page 2, number 1, and the Flip side of the page would be Daf Bet Amud Bet, the second page of Daf Bet. So if you're looking at a Gemara open, this is the left side of the page, and you would turn it sort of Hebrew style, and then the second page, Daf Bet Amud Bet, would be the right side of the folio. I won't go over the Mishnah again because we just did it. Now we're going to get into the Gemara. So, what is the Gemara? The Gemara is a detailed commentary and analysis of the Mishnah. It elaborates on the Mishnah's brief legal statements, offering explanations, interpretations, and discussions, and sometimes arguments, and sometimes it gets really funny. Who wrote the Gemara? The Gemara was developed by various rabbinic scholars called Amoraim, as opposed to the Mishnah scholars who were called Tanaim, in two main centers: Babylonia, which is called the Talmud Bavli, was compiled around 500 CE, and Palestine Yerushalmi Talmud, which was compiled around 400 CE. What is the content of the Gemara? Debates, stories, legal reasoning, analysis, etc., 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 of the laws of the Mishnah. And it cites other traditions, it asks questions, challenges opinions, and provides reasons for different legal rulings. And sometimes not. Sometimes the Gemara leaves you hanging, which after 3 pages of Gemara, you don't get your answer. It can be a little frustrating. What's the purpose of the Gemara? Is to explain, elaborate, and sometimes dispute the Mishnah's laws. It fills in gaps, offers reasoning for why certain laws are stated the way they are, and often incorporating philosophical, ethical, and theological discussions. Okay, there's a lot of terminology associated with the learning of Talmud. Over and over again, we've said Tanaim, Amoraim, Mishnah, Gemara. Once we dive into Gemara, the term sugya is used. Okay, so we're about to learn a sugya. Whoops. What is a sugya? Hold on one second. A sugya is a term used in Jewish Talmudic literature. It refers to a particular topic, section, or discussion within the Talmud. It's an analysis in study, often dealing with a specific legal question, a concept, or a narrative, and the debates and interpretations surrounding it. So it's a section. It typically involves exploration of multiple opinions, often with disagreements, and so on. They can, on the third note, they can really vary in length. Some are just a couple of lines, and some could be a page or 2 pages even. And always leads us to further explore analysis by later commentators, and of course, such as Rashi, Tosfot, and others. It's a central unit of study in the Talmud, and we are about to dive into a sugya. Comes from the Aramaic word segi, which means to go, used in Jewish studies, specifically Talmud. I don't really know of using the word sugya anywhere else. But I mean, it could be. It's not like illegal or anything, but really sugya is Gemara. Okay, so now we're going to take a look. Just before we dive in, we're all good?
Yep.
So again, I always like starting from the daf, from the page. It's important, I think, to look at the traditional layout of the Gemara. So again, on the right, if you can see the Gimel Mem, right? Gemara, right? So the Mishnah starts at the very top. This is the Mishnah, and now we're going to start the Gemara, and I zoomed in. Okay? So Tana, Heicha kai diktani me'ematai. So Gemara usually comes in with a question. Tana, where did the Tana, who's from the Mishnah, Kai diktani me'ematai. From where do we start learning me'ematai? Why did we start learning this aspect of law? So again, not asking why are we learning the Shema? Why is this the first thing that the Mishnah is teaching us? From when do we recite it? So I'm just going to stop the share. So it's always important to try to understand the question of the Gemara. So why did the Gemara, why, so the Gemara is asking, why did the Mishnah start from this aspect of the law? Logically, what should the Mishnah have started with? Keeping in mind that the Mishnah is codified Jewish law. It started by telling us, when can we recite the Shema? Right? That's the question of the Mishnah. So the Gemara is asking, why did the Mishnah ask that question? What should the Mishnah have said, or what should the Mishnah have taught us first?
And we're talking about the tractate of the Mishnah, which refers to religious rituals, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But specifically with regards of Shema, I would say that the Gemara is not asking why are we learning Shema. We've resolved to the fact that we're going to talk about the laws of Shema. But what should we, if I'm going to teach the laws of Shema, okay, let's say you just signed on to the Zoom. This is a class that's going to discuss the laws of Shema. What's the first thing you expect to learn? It's a good question.
What does the Shema consist of, or is that obvious?
Oh, that's close. Bill, you're like you're hopping where the Gemara is going.
Shema Yisrael.
Okay, let's see if the Gemara answers. Vitu, and furthermore, Maishna detani be'arvit beresha, letani de shachrit beresha, and furthermore, why did the Tana teach us the arvit, the nighttime first? Litni de shachrit beresha, we should have learned shachrit first. So the Gemara comes in asking two questions. What is this Tana talking about? Why are we starting about the times of Shema? Maybe we should have started somewhere else. And why are we starting with the Mariv Shema and not the Shachrit Shema? Okay, I also provide the Nikudot and the Sefaria translation. So we just asked this question. Tana, the Mishnah opens with the laws concerning the appropriate time to recite Shema with a question. On the basis of what does the Tana ask me'ematai? From when? On the basis of what prior knowledge does the Tana of our Mishnah ask from when? It would seem from his question that the obligation to recite Shema in the evening was already established, right? Maybe the Mishnah should have said, we're obligated to recite the Shema in the evening. That would be, right? So that would be the appropriate place to start teaching about the laws of Shema, is to explain the laws of Shema, not already diving into the details. And the Tana seeks only to clarify the details that relate to it, but our Mishnah is the very first Mishnah in the Talmud. Again, our question is, our Mishnah is the first Mishnah in the codified Mishnahs, and it's like we're coming in mid, conversation. Like we didn't start with the quote B'shoch b'chal v'kumecha that we're commanded to say Shema. We're already talking about the times. So the Gemara is asking, why did we do this?
Adam, this feels like the story of my Jewish learning, where no one explained to me what I was doing. They just told me when to do it. This is how we were taught.
100%, and that's how they're still taught. My sons learn how to say the Shema and do the Shema before they're ever taught that it's a commandment and it's a mitzvah and where it's from.
So you
You
shall
know,
accept it, and you shall do like when we accepted the Torah,
Na'aseh v'nishma.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Do
exactly
it.
right.
Yeah.
What is the meaning for Tana?
Tana literally means to teach,
Yeah.
but when we talk about Tanaim, those were the rabbis from the Mishnah.
Oh,
So anytime that the Gemara uses the word Tana, it
yeah.
means we were taught in the Mishnah. Okay. So we always look at Rashi. So just to show you on the daf, if my eyes can see, we're here. Gemara Hechakai. This is the Rashi, which I've zoomed in. So Dibora Matchil Hechakai. How is it possible that the Mishnah starts the with the question already Me'ematai from when? Mihechakai Salik Detana by Chovat Kriyat Shma. שהתחיל לשאול כאן זמן הקריאה. Whoops. From where does the Tana conclude the obligation to read Kriyat Shema that he began to ask here at the time of reading? So Rashi is explaining the question of the Gemara. Right? And then we asked the second question. And furthermore, why are we learning the Shema from Arvit first? We should have learned Shachrit first. Since most mitzvot apply during the day, the Tana, the rabbi in the Mishnah, should discuss the morning Shema before discussing the evening Shema, just as the daily morning offering is discussed before the evening offering. So, okay, so Sefaria often adds in other commentaries within its translation. So later we start learning about offerings, and we learn about the morning korbans before the evening korban. So they're just further asking this question. Let's go on. Tana ekra kai dichtiv b'shoch becha u'bekumecha. So the Gemara answers that it says b'shoch becha uvekumecha, when you lie down and when you arise. By teaching the laws of the evening Shema first, the Tana has established that the teachings of the oral Torah correspond to that which is taught in the written Torah. And based on the written Torah, the Tana teaches the oral law. When is the time for the recitation of Shema of lying down as commanded in the Torah? Which we learned in the Mishnah, from when the priests enter to partake of their truma. Just as the written Torah begins with the evening Shema, so too must the oral Torah. So to me, that makes sense to answer the second question. Why are we learning? Why are we talking about the Shema at night first? Because it says b'shoch bechav kumecha. How does the answer b'shoch bechav kumecha answer the first question? The Gemara is asking, it seems like we're already jumping in to the details of the law. Why didn't the Mishnah start with teaching us that we're commanded to say the Shema at night? That should be the first law. Of the very first Mishnah, the very first law, we're already talking about the details. So the Gemara answers because it says b'shoch b'chav kumecha. But so I'm asking, how does that answer the question?
I'm not sure if I understand your question. Sorry, Adam.
The question is, the Gemara is asking, why didn't the Mishnah essentially start by teaching us we're commanded to say the Shema? And then the next sentence
Okay.
is, from when are we commanded to say the Shema?
Okay.
We're commanded from the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma.
Okay.
Instead, they omit the first part, and we're launching right into the details.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gemara then answers because it says b'shoch b'chav kumecha. So my question is, how does that answer the question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't understand how it answers the question because we've established that when the Kohanim enter to eat the truma or whatever, that's not the time that you're going to bed. There's a gap of a third of the night or something. So there seems to be a contradiction to me, or else I don't get what you're asking.
So I'm not talking about the truma. I'm talking about the first part.
You're saying, why aren't they telling us that we're not commanded, the commandment to say the Shema? They talk right away the details about when we say it rather than.
Exactly. I'm saying that I'm first of all, I'm not saying the Gemara is asking, why didn't the Mishnah start by teaching us, hey guys, we're commanded to say the Shema? But instead, it says, hey guys, do you know when we're commanded to say the Shema? From the time that, dot, dot, dot.
Because it's already in the Torah that we're commanded to say the Shema.
Boom! Roger Antebi for the win. That's the answer. Because it says, b'shoch b'chav kumecha. The Torah tells us that we're commanded, and even goes further and says, when you lie down and when you get up. So now the rabbis are commenting on that. It's
Explain
exactly
to
right.
me the word truma. There's many. Truma is a gift. Am I correct?
Correct.
But also, when last Shabbos, when we read the Parsha, they spoke of truma, which was the construction, Hashem giving orders how to build the Mishkan. So, where does it come in? Or does it have many meanings? Hello?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking.
I'm thinking.
I'm sorry, I thought I lost you. That's why I said
No,
hello.
no. I'm here.
Okay, you can answer next week. It's okay.
So truma might mean offering.
Like a truma, an offering.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
not exactly sure of the literal translation. Tarum. I mean, tarum means to go up, right?
Yeah.
Marom.
Right.
I think the confusion comes that in modern Hebrew, there's a root that's not biblical, litrom, to contribute, but that's a new root that's based
Right.
on truma, which comes from larum, as you just said, lifting up. But that's not a biblical meaning of it. Doesn't, there's no verb in biblical Hebrew, ta'am. That's a modern creation.
Okay, Adam, mark it down. You'll let me know next week.
Sure. Let's do a little bit more of the sugya. Right? And so here comes Rashi to answer on the text that is based, and there you can learn the obligation of reading, right? The sham lamad chovata kriya. Where's the sham? Where's there? From the Torah, right? B'shoch b'chav kumecha. That's what taught us that we're commanded to say the Shema. Again, we're always going to Rashi when we don't understand. Now we go on. Where are we? Ve'i bait ema yalif mi briato shel olam. And if you want, you could say that we derive this from the creation of the world. Dichtiv, vayhi erev, vayhi voker yom echad, as it is written, and it was night, and then it was day on the first day. So this is again really answering the second question. What does Safari say? However, there is another possible explanation for why the Mishnah opens with the evening, right? And if you want, you could say from Briato Shel Olam, from the creation of the world, Vayi Erev, Vayi Voker, evening comes first. According to this verse, day begins with the evening and not the morning. For both of these reasons, it was appropriate to open the discussion of the laws of the recitation of Shema with the evening Shema. Rashi offers a comment on Ve'i Bayet Ema. This is the Rashi Tevot. This is the abbreviation Ve'i Bayet Ema. Haditna Arvin Beresha Yalif Mibriato Shalolam. The reason is we learn the evening first, as we learn it from the creation of the world. We'll go on. Ihachi Seifa Diktani B'Shachar Mavrech Shtam Lefaneh B'Chalachareha. If so, why does later on in a later Mishnah teach that in the morning we recite two blessings before the Shema and one blessing after, but at the nighttime we have two blessings that precede the Shema and two after. The Mishnah Litni to Arvit Beresha. The Mishnah should have taught us about Arvit first, right? So now it's sort of saying, well, it's weird that later on when we're talking about the blessings that bookend Shema, the Mishnah tells us about Shachrit first and not night first. Tana ptach ba'arvit v'hadar tani b'shachrit.
You turn on
Sorry,
the,
Eli, what's that?
it's 8:25. No, sorry.
8:25.
Yeah.
Tana patach ba'arvit. So the Mishnah started with arvit, v'hadar tani b'shachrit, and then taught us shachrit. Ad dekai b'shachrit, paresh milei de And once it was already teaching us the laws of shachrit, it continued to explain shachrit. The hadar parish milei de arvit, and then continued with the explanations of arvit. So a very practical answer. That later, when the Mishnah tells us about the blessings surrounding the Shema, it told us about the shachrit first because it was already on the shachrit, and then discussed arvit. Rashi's comment, it then taught about the morning, from when we can read the Shema in the morning. So he's sort of, if we would ask, what do they teach us about the morning? He answers, it teaches us from when we can recite the Shema in the morning. Okay, so this is the first sugya. That was the first sugya, the first sort of discourse. And you see how it could take a long time because they're really sort of nitpicking at stuff. And we're still only talking about the first line of the Mishnah, right? And then keep in mind that they do this for every little thing in the Mishnah. And this was a short sugya. So I think maybe we should pause here because then the next sugya starts.
Adam, excuse me, I have to say goodnight. Thank you very much. I'll see you next week.
Laila Tov, I think maybe we will also perhaps pause formal learning and we can maybe schmooze for a few more minutes. But if there's any questions or comments about the Gemara, but this is really, again, this is a taste of Talmud, right? So I want everyone to come away with a taste, like how the Gemara is structured, how it starts asking the question, how people grab other teachings. Well, how come it says later in the Mishnah where it talks about Shachrit first? Well, later in the Mishnah they were already talking about Shachrit, so they continued to talk about Shachrit. Then they went back to the Arvi. Like this is that type of discourse that happens.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
My pleasure. Anyone want to say anything? Doesn't have to be about Gemara. It could be about what you're doing tomorrow.
It seems that there's something simple, but they start by the end to explain certain details when the main idea, we should go to the main idea first and then develop.
So you totally hit on something. That is such a style that they nitpick on these granular little details, like
Yeah.
like really like, and sort of don't tackle the main issue at first, but they like go around and talk about a word and that, but how come there it says, and it's kind of tedious on, the one hand, but really fascinating on the other hand. The
Mm.
way that they really dissect
Maybe the
stuff and like,
content, Georgette, was obvious to them. Maybe the content was already obvious to them, and it's not to us. Like we want to know why we do, like what are we doing? And for them, they already know. So maybe they nitpick on the details around it. I don't know.
But
Maybe.
I mean, pedagogically, you start by a simple thing and then you go into the
As a kid, it
detail.
was definitely a lot harder this way.
Yeah. Like, where's your left ear?
It occurs to me that just this little taste, you understand how there are people, even if they're not particularly observant, are fascinated with Talmud because it teaches you how to reason and ask questions of why you accept something or how you can derive something from something else. It's legal reasoning.
And there's no silly question.
The content is almost, I don't want to say irrelevant, but you can.
But I guess you have to study quite a bit to get to the real understanding of how you come logically to reason properly. I think you have to really practice it. It's not just by reading a thing here and there. You really have to get into it, nitty-gritty, and really practice it. You can't understand from the
100%.
outside. We all say, oh, it's complicated and stuff, but I think you have to put your feet into it and really, really, immerse yourself in it to really understand. That's what I think.
Yeah, you need to experience it.
Yeah.
I think there was the nitpicking because in the Mishnah and follow up by the Gemara, they were really grasping to develop the religion because they were starting from scratch at some time since the destruction of the temple, and they got to find points because they were what the discussion is the beginning of Judaism as we know it today and as it became known then.
It's rabbinic Judaism as opposed to Torah temple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not something to take lightly. That's for sure. I can see that.
But I wonder in the end, if they were writing it for people to understand, then at no point does it's not simple. And it goes to what you were saying, Georgette, that you're not getting the cookbook thing. You want to do this, then you have to follow this. It's not that. And that's interesting.
Sometimes they're arguing back and forth and going circuitous ways, and they don't really come to a final answer too.
That's exactly right.
But this was not aimed at at the everyday Jew to learn things. This was only for selected people to read, right?
Mhm.
Oh,
Experienced
Yes.
people who
yeah.
could. So I mean, I don't think it's aimed for everyday Jew. It's aimed for selected people who are really studying. And I
Well,
guess you
that
really
also,
do. You get to
you know,
the end of it and you understand, then it must be incredible to be able to reason that way.
but I think Avram also hit on something in terms of preservation, right? Like, keep in mind that these people, they were exiled from their homes. You know, the temple is destroyed. They're by the rivers of Babylon, literally, not knowing if they're ever going to get back to Zion. Even the Yerushalmi, even the sages that were by Tiberia and the Kinneret, um, were like hiding in caves, right? This is major Jewish persecution happening now. These Tanaim, which we read about on Pesach and read about on the high holidays. I mean, they suffered a horrible fate. Um, and so I think that there's also this, and like you can even almost feel it. There's like this frantic energy almost, to codify all these details, and because it's an archive, right? It's and so so I think that that's also perhaps why they took such great care, um, to write down all the details, not just like the answer, you
Is it
know?
written in such a complicated way because they didn't want everybody to understand?
No,
Like,
this was the
no,
language.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Weren't they writing the oral tradition down? So in other words, these are discussions that have been passed down from
correct.
generation to generation, and they're just now writing down these conversations that were passed down. They're not necessarily having that conversation.
That's correct.
But who was it aimed at?
I mean, that's a very good question. Um, I would think it's aimed at the future.
Oh, that brings another light to it.
Part of it was their anxiety that if they didn't write it down, however they wrote it down, as what you were saying, Hazan, if they didn't write it down, where would the future be? So there was, this. So I guess they felt that if they didn't go into sufficient detail, it would change the future of Judaism as we know it.
Right. Yeah. And here we are 2,000 years later. It's quite something.
Hmm.
All right, everyone. Laila Tov.
Tov.
See you next
Thank
week when
you.
we will take a look at some other questions that the Gemara asks about our Mishnah.
Thank you. Thank you,
All
Adam.
right.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Nice.
See you
Take
next
care.
week.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.